So you've been keeping up with what's going on at Kursk, I say.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely heating up over there.
It really is.
Ready?
And it feels like, something we should dig into a bit more.
Definitely. Way more going on than just what we see in the headlines, I think.
Exactly. And, for this deep dive, we've got some pretty in-depth military analysis to work with.
Excellent.
So we're going to try to unpack not just what's happening like on the ground there in Kursk,
Right.
but also what it might mean for power dynamics inside Russia itself,
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah.
beyond the headlines, as always.
I like it.
So one thing that's really caught my eye, just right off the bat, is how Ukraine has actually been making gains in Kursk.
Yeah.
And, this is historically significant territory for Russia. Like, what's making this campaign different?
I think it's the strategic efficiency that really jumps out at you.
Okay.
You see Ukrainian forces, obviously they're using a mix of Western training. They've got some innovative tactics, but they're really maximizing their impact. Like they're hitting hard,
Yeah.
but at the same time, they're keeping their own casualties surprisingly low.
That's interesting.
From what I'm seeing, they're really good at leveraging real-time intel.
Oh, wow.
And they've got those advanced weapons, right? So they can target Russian logistics. They can hit those command structures. And that just completely disrupts Russia's ability to fight back effectively.
Wow.
This targeted approach, it's a real change from those massive offensives we saw earlier in the war.
Yeah.
It's much more focused.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And you mentioned casualties, and that's one thing, it's tough to get a clear picture of.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of conflicting information flying around out there.
Definitely.
So Ukrainian command, they're claiming Russian losses are somewhere around 17,800 since the start of this whole thing.
Wow.
But then you got Putin on the other side. He's saying that, no, it's the Ukrainians who are encircled. And he even put out a number. He says 2,000 Ukrainian troops are trapped.
Okay.
So, how do we even begin to make sense of numbers that are that different?
You have to remember, battlefield data, any kind of data in an active war zone,
Right.
it is so hard to verify. It's really tough. And both sides have a reason to spin things.
Totally.
So we've got to be super careful about propaganda. But what's interesting? Even some of the Russian military bloggers and even some of their analysts, they're pushing back on what Putin's saying.
No way, really.
Yeah, and some of them are even suggesting that it might be the Russians who are facing encirclement.
Wow.
I mean, that kind of disagreement right there, that really tells you something.
It does, yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's not just about the numbers, it's the different stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we definitely need to, take all those figures, all those numbers with a grain of salt.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But one thing that seems pretty clear is that this Kursk operation, even if it's, not huge in terms of scale, it's definitely exposed some real cracks in the Russian military.
For sure.
Can you talk a bit more about that?
Absolutely. So the main place you see this tension, right,
Yeah.
is between the regular Russian army on the one hand, and then you've got the Chechen units that are under Ramzan Kadyrov.
Okay.
Specifically this group called the Ahmad Battalion. And it's gotten pretty public. They're throwing accusations back and forth, incompetence, blame shifting, that kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
Which, it makes you think. Because when that happens, it usually means that the chain of command is breaking down, and that just kills morale.
It's got to, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bad sign.
Yeah, and it seems like whenever Kadyrov's name comes up, things just get, they get a whole lot more complicated.
He's a fascinating guy, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like super powerful leader inside Chechnya, but his history with the Kremlin, with Moscow, it's long and it's twisty. I mean, You've got periods of cooperation, but then you've got outright conflict.
Wow.
So his loyalty, it's never been a sure thing. It's always been conditional. And him criticizing the Russian military right now, he's doing that could be a sign that he's making moves, positioning himself.
Oh, interesting.
Protecting his own power base.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe even thinking about challenging Putin's authority down the line.
Wow. That just adds a whole other layer to this whole situation.
It does, yeah.
It's really interesting. So looking forward then, what do you think? What are the long-term implications of what we're seeing in Kursk, especially as we head towards 2025?
Okay, so even if Ukraine has to pull back from Kursk at some point, winter's coming, logistical stuff could get really difficult.
Yeah.
But the pressure they've put on, that's not going to just disappear.
Right.
This operation, it's shown that the Russian military has weak points. They've got these internal divisions, and those can be exploited, absolutely, in future campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
I think people forget modern warfare, it's not just about, taking land.
Right.
It's about psychology. It's about, messing with the enemy's ability to command their troops.
Yeah.
It's about finding those cracks, those internal cracks, and using them to win.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it really, this whole conversation really highlights how important it is to look beyond just the headlines.
Oh, 100%.
And the immediate updates from the battlefield.
You have to
understand what's really going on.
What's at stake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Kursk, it's this little window, into the future of the war.
Yeah.
But also, like you said, into the power dynamics inside Russia, that's maybe even more important.
Yeah, potentially, I think, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've covered a lot, but I have to say I'm left with even more questions now.
Always the way, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But so I'm wondering, what do you think if these tensions inside Russia, if they keep getting worse, could they actually end up being more important to how the war turns out than any single battle? What do you think?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It is.
It really makes you think.
Yeah, it does. It's definitely something to consider.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, on that note, keep exploring this stuff. Keep asking those tough questions. We'll be back next time with another deep dive.
Sounds good.
All right. Until then.
See ya.
Yeah.